June 28, 1984. 79-year-old Jenny Vinkow is alone, sleeping in her house. But tonight, she makes a mistake. She leaves one of the windows open. Richard Ramirez sees this opportunity and breaks in. He goes through every drawer, every cupboard, and steals whatever he can. But he doesn't stop there. Ramirez makes his way to the bedroom where she's sleeping. He repeatedly stabs her to death. This was thought to be the first murder of the Night Stalker, and it would take many more to finally catch him.
Today, the search for California's Night Stalker continues, and many residents sleep with their doors and windows bolted tight, despite 100-degree temperatures.
On March 17, 1985, 9 months after killing Jenny Vinkow, Ramirez would strike again. He attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez, who was outside her home at the time, shooting her with a .22 caliber handgun. Thankfully, she survived as the bullet ricocheted off the keys she held in her hands. Hernandez played dead until Ramirez left the scene. But her roommate wasn't so lucky. Inside the house, her roommate, 34-year-old Okazaki, heard the gunshot and ducked behind a counter when she saw Ramirez enter the kitchen. When she raised her head to get a look at what had happened, Ramirez, waiting for Okazaki to peek over the counter, shot her once in the forehead, killing her instantly. Within an hour of the Rosemead attack, Ramirez pulled 30-year-old Tsai Lian Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park, shot her twice and fled. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. The two murders, and an attempted third, in a single day attracted extensive coverage from news media, who dubbed the attacker, described as curly-haired with bulging eyes and wide-spaced rotting teeth, calling him the walk-in killer. 1 week later, he killed a married couple, Vincent and Maxine Zazzara. Maxine's body was found brutally mutilated with her eyes removed. The same kind of gun in the previous murders had been used. Ramirez left another clue: footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers, which the police photographed and cast. The police determined that a serial killer was on the loose, but Richard was just getting started. During this time, there were a series of child abductions in Montebello, Monterey Park, and Glassell Park. All of the children were sexually assaulted and then abandoned.
February 25th in Montebello, a 6-year-old girl was taken from a schoolyard, molested, then abandoned.
One of those children was 6-year-old Anastasia Hronas. She and the other children provided police with a description of their kidnapper that raised alarms for Detective Gil Carrillo, a homicide detective, noticed a striking resemblance to the description provided by Maria Hernandez, a previous victim. Both Hernandez and the abducted children described their attacker as a tall, light-skinned individual with brown-stained teeth, a distinctive odor, and a members-only style jacket. Detective Gil thought that maybe, just maybe, these crimes were committed by the same man. So Gil took his suspicions to his fellow detective Frank Salerno. Just a couple years earlier, Detective Frank Salerno had led the investigation of the Hillside Strangler case. He made a name for himself as a talented homicide detective. Now he was investigating Richard Ramirez's case with Detective Gil. He didn't agree with Detective Gil at first, further stating that it was unheard of for a criminal to have such wide-ranging types of victims. While most serial killers only target specific people, Ramirez was different. He attacked men, women, and even children. Ramirez also used various weapons and methods of killing. As time went on, more and more people reported similar nighttime break-ins and attacks in nearby cities of Monrovia, Burbank, and Arcadia. On July 5th, Whitney Bennett, then 16, was attacked with a tire iron in her parents' home in Sierra Madre. Though badly wounded, she survived. While examining the crime scene, the police discovered another shoe print that matched the prints found in previous cases. This compelling evidence solidified Carrillo's belief that these crimes were the work of a single individual. After the police determined that the attacks around the city were likely all by one individual, they started looking into other similar cases from the same period. One case that raised alarms with Carrillo and Salerno was an attempted abduction near Eagle Rock, a neighborhood in northeast Los Angeles. The victim police would describe as a young female fought off a would-be abductor who drove away in a Toyota. Moments later, another officer spotted the Toyota committing a traffic violation, but after he was pulled over, the suspect escaped on foot, leaving the car behind. Before he ran, he drew a pentagram, a satanic symbol, into the dust on the windshield. Carrillo and Salerno tracked that stolen Toyota to a nearby impound lot. They requested to print the car, but they couldn't access the vehicle for weeks. In the meantime, the killer was still on the loose, and the clock was ticking. On July 7, 1985, 60-year-old Joyce Nelson was murdered in her home in Monterey Park. Police found AVS sneaker footprints on the side of Nelson's head and on the concrete outside of her home. The same night, Sophie Dickman was sexually assaulted in her Monterey Park home. Dickman would later quote Ramirez as saying, "Don't look at me, or I'll cut out your eyes," during the attack. Although Carrillo and Salerno were finally able to get their hands on the stolen Toyota, but they weren't able to recover any fingerprints. Still, there was one clue left inside: a business card for a local dentist in Chinatown. Police paid a visit to the dentist's office and discovered that their suspect had just visited a few days earlier, not long before the Bennett, Nelson, and Dickman attacks. Ramirez was using the alias Richard Mena and a fake address. The dentist gave the police X-ray scans that showed an impacted tooth. Police efforts to intercept the killer at the dentist's office were unsuccessful. By the end of July, Ramirez struck again, this time killing Layla and Maxon Knighting in Glendale, California. The gun used in the Knighting murders was the same he used in the Okazaki case. The police were just investigating the Knighting murders when another body turned up a few miles away in Sun Valley. Chainarong Kovaneth was found shot to death with a .22 caliber gun, the same gun used in the Knighting and Okazaki killings. His wife and son were sexually assaulted, but left alive. 2 more avia prints were found at the crime scene. At this point, police released a drawing of the suspect to the public. It was around this time that the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner dubbed the killer the Night Stalker.
Known as the Night Stalker.
Night Stalker suspect Richard Ramirez.
Today, the search for California's Night Stalker continues.
2 nights later, the killer broke into a home in Diamond Bar. Again, the husband was executed, the wife was sexually assaulted. He screamed at her to tell the truth, saying, "Swear on Satan and told don't look at me." 10 days later, 66-year-old Peter Pan had been shot and killed. The wife, Barbara Pan, was raped and shot but survived the attack. A satanic symbol was also carved into the wall. Glendale police asked for ballistics information on the shell casings at the scene. As it turned out, the bullets matched the ones found at the Northridge and Diamond Bar attacks. Then Mayor of San Francisco Dianne Feinstein gave a press conference shortly after the Pan murders. She publicly revealed, for the first time, that police had tied the cases together with shell casings and the avia shoe print. Then the police got a major breakthrough. In late August 1985, a young man named James Romero came forward with some information. He'd seen a suspicious car in his Mission Viejo neighborhood. He reported seeing an orange Toyota station wagon with a license plate that included the numbers 8 and 2. Shortly afterward, Romero's car sighting was shared with the local news media, resulting in another man to come forward. He told investigators that a friend recently had an orange Toyota station wagon stolen in Chinatown.
The car the killer may still have was stolen in LA's Chinatown this weekend. It is a 1976 Toyota station wagon, orange in color, license number 482RTS. It has not yet been found.
The plates matched. Police quickly located the vehicle, a 1976 orange Toyota station wagon, in a parking lot in downtown Los Angeles. The Orange County Crime Lab processed the car, and there it was, a fingerprint. The police had been waiting for this for many months. In the early days of the Night Stalker investigation, California's fingerprint database was still in its infancy. This meant that law enforcement had to rely on traditional methods to compare prints found at crime scenes, like the stolen car. While detectives pursued other leads, a significant tip emerged from a concerned citizen. Her father, convinced he had befriended the killer, shared information about a man from El Paso, Texas, who went by the name Rick. This individual had reportedly boasted about possessing insider knowledge of the Night Stalker murders, even before the details were publicly released. Concurrently, in San Francisco, investigators were following a separate lead involving a Rick from El Paso. This trail, connected to a stolen bracelet, led them to Armando Rodriguez, a friend of Ramirez. It was Rodriguez who revealed the Night Stalker's true identity as Richard Ramirez. Now, with a name in hand, the police began their search. Their records revealed 8 individuals named Richard Ramirez, and after comparing fingerprints, they narrowed it down to a single suspect. This individual had a prior criminal record, including arrests for grand theft auto and petty theft. When the 1984 booking photo was presented to the informant in San Francisco, he positively identified the man as Richard Ramirez, the elusive Night Stalker. With the suspect's identity and photo publicly released, Richard Ramirez's face quickly became a familiar one throughout Los Angeles. The next morning, he found himself staring at his own image on the front page of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, and his name and photo were splashed across local television newscasts. Startled by the sudden media attention, Ramirez fled the scene, leaving a liquor store in downtown Los Angeles. The once elusive Night Stalker was now a hunted man. As Ramirez fled the scene, his distinctive features made him instantly recognizable to the public. He sprinted across the 5 freeway into Boyle Heights, where he attempted a desperate carjacking of Faustino Pinon. Just a few blocks away, Ramirez attempted another carjacking, this time targeting Angelina de la Torre. He demanded the keys in Spanish, but she refused. When her husband, Manuel de la Torre, heard the commotion, he rushed to her aid. Confronting Ramirez, he struck the Night Stalker on the head with a metal pole. Hearing the commotion, neighbors gathered around Ramirez. As the police arrived, the crowd was pointing excitedly at the newspapers, identifying the man they had detained as the notorious Night Stalker. Shortly after his capture, Ramirez boldly proclaimed to the police, "It's me." This admission, coupled with the overwhelming evidence against him, left little doubt that he was indeed the Night Stalker. A large crowd had gathered outside the Hollenbeck police station, eager to catch a glimpse of the man who had terrorized Los Angeles during the summer of 1985. Okay, so Richard was finally caught. The people wanted to know who this man was and what made him the monster he became. Before we talk about Richard's past, if you guys enjoy watching horror and true crime documentaries, then please like the video and subscribe. While it's impossible to pinpoint a single event that turned Ramirez into a killer, his troubled childhood provides a glimpse into the complex factors that may have contributed to his dark path. Born in El Paso, Texas on 29 February 1960, Ramirez was the youngest of 5 children. His father, Julian, was a railway laborer. He was an alcoholic who would physically abuse his wife and children. His mother, Mercedes, worked at a boot factory. Richard reportedly sustained multiple head injuries at an early age. He was knocked unconscious by a swing at age 5. After that, he began experiencing temporal lobe epilepsy. By 10, he started doing drugs. A psychiatrist named Michael Stone describes Ramirez as a made psychopath, as opposed to a born psychopath. He says that Ramirez's schizoid personality disorder contributed to his indifference to the suffering of his victims and his untreatability. At age 12, he moved in with his older cousin, Mike. Richard idolized Mike. He served in the U.S. Army and had just came from Vietnam. One day, he showed Richard Polaroid photos of innocent Vietnamese women he had done terrible things to, while most children would be terrified. Richard was fascinated by the images Mike shared. Around this time, Ramirez began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. His father would tie him to a crucifix in a cemetery overnight as punishment. Shortly after Ramirez had turned 14 in 1974, he began using drugs frequently. He and Mike resumed bonding over their shared use of drugs and alcohol. It was during this period that Ramirez began to cultivate an interest in Satanism and the occult. While still in school, he took a job at a local Holiday Inn and used his master key to rob sleeping guests. His employment ended abruptly after Ramirez attempted to rape a woman in her hotel room and was caught in the act by the victim's husband. Although the husband beat Ramirez at the scene, criminal charges were dropped when the couple, who lived out of state, declined to return to Texas to testify against him. At the age of 15, Ramirez was present on May 4, 1975, when Mike fatally shot his second wife during a domestic argument. Like the graphic photos and stories of his cousin's war crimes in Vietnam, Ramirez wasn't traumatized, in fact. He was fascinated. After the shooting, Ramirez became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers. After his elder cousin's murder of his second wife, Ramirez dropped out of school in the 9th grade, shortly before the school year ended. Soon after Mike was arrested, Richard moved in with his older sister, Ruth, and her husband, Roberto. He lived with them till 1982. At age 22, he moved to California for good. It was around this time he got addicted to cocaine. To feed his growing addiction, Ramirez turned to a life of crime, committing a series of thefts and burglaries. He drifted between San Francisco and Los Angeles County until he was eventually captured. Remember how I said Jenny Winkow was the first victim he killed? Turns out he actually killed someone before that. He murdered Mei Lung. an innocent 9-year-old Chinese-American girl, in the basement of his apartment building in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. Lung was with her 8-year-old brother, searching for a lost dollar bill, when Ramirez lured the young girl into the basement under the false pretense of helping her find it. Once alone with his victim, Ramirez strangled, raped, and stabbed her to death. The murder of Mei Lung remained a cold case for nearly 3 decades, until a breakthrough in 2009 when Ramirez's DNA was definitively linked to the crime scene evidence. July 1988, Ramirez appeared in court for the first time. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him. But before he left, he showed a pentagram on his hand and said, "Hail Satan."
Hail Satan.
In September 1989, Richard Ramirez was found guilty of all the crimes he was accused of. He was found guilty of 13 murders, 5 tried murders, 11 attacks, and 14 break-ins. He was given 19 death sentences. In 1996, Richard Ramirez married Doreen Lioy, a woman who had been a fan of his. They got married in San Quentin Prison in California. But Lioy left Ramirez in 2009 when his DNA was found to be connected to a murder. Ramirez died in 2013 while he was waiting to be executed. He died from a disease called B-cell lymphoma. Today, Richard Ramirez is no longer alive, but still the pain and suffering of his victims' families continues.